Over the years, I've worked with thousands of professionals from companies like Netflix, PayPal, Google, and Amazon. And many of them share the same frustration. They've landed incredible roles, but when they have to speak in English, they feel like a child. They usually describe it like this: I know what I want to say in my own language, but when I try to speak in English, it feels unnatural. It feels slow and just wrong. If this resonates with you, let me reassure you that it's not just you. My approach is all about practical strategies and actionable tips that help you build the skills in order for you to thrive in a global situation. Whether you are here to improve your fluency, expand your professional vocabulary, or overcome hesitation, you're in the right place. If that sounds interesting to you, please give this video a like and subscribe for more videos just like this one. Your support means so much to me, and it helps me to continue making content just like this. So thank you. Today, we are looking at one of the most common barriers to fluency: translating in your head. We'll talk about why translating slows you down. Then I will share 3 proven strategies to help you overcome it. And finally, I'll guide you through a quick exercise to put it all into practice. I want to quickly mention that I've put together a toolkit for professionals. It's packed with lots of different strategies to help you when it comes to speaking fluently and confidently. You can download it right now with the link in the description, and it's completely free. So why do we translate in our heads? When you are learning a new language, translating is a natural first step. Your brain relies on your native language as a framework, and it helps you to understand new words and phrases. And this happens because your brain defaults to familiar patterns. And your native language or languages are like well-oiled machines. They are natural, efficient, and automatic. English, on the other hand, feels like a new piece of software that you're still trying to figure out. Language learning is a process. In the beginning, translating helps you to bridge the gap between what you know and what you're trying to say. But here's the problem. As you advance, translating becomes less helpful and actually more disruptive. The problem with translating in your head is that it slows you down. I remember studying Japanese on Duolingo, and I had a student who was from Japan. I tried to have a conversation with her, but it was very difficult because I was constantly trying to remember each of the words, and I had the words in my mind, but I couldn't seem to put them together. It was like having a jigsaw puzzle. I had the pieces, but I just couldn't fit them together. When you translate in your head, your brain is working in 2 stages. First, it decodes your thoughts in your native language, or languages if you speak more than one. Then it encodes them into English. It's almost like when you're trying to cross a very busy street. Instead of walking directly across, you go halfway and then to the side and then back again. And you do finally make it to the other side, but it's much slower and really exhausting. Translating also causes many mistakes. And sometimes those mistakes can be quite funny, but other times they can be extremely embarrassing and awkward. And that's especially true in a professional setting. Words and expressions that make sense in one language don't always translate very well. I've had one of my students tell me, "I have cold." Now in Spanish, this translates well. It means I'm feeling cold. But in English, it's just a little bit confusing. And while it's a small mistake, it can be odd to an English speaker. Mistakes like these can be harmless in a casual conversation, but in professional situations, they can feel much more significant. Imagine managing a team or presenting your ideas in front of different stakeholders, and then you make a mistake that comes across awkward or even childish. It can be really frustrating because it's not a true reflection of your actual expertise or intelligence, but it might impact in how others perceive you in that moment. One of the issues with translating, other than embarrassing yourself, is that it leads to missed opportunities. When you are stuck translating, you are not fully present in the conversation. I remember the conversation with my Japanese student. I wasn't fully engaged. All I was thinking of is, how do I say that word? Or I can't remember what's the phrase? And we weren't having that true connection. And it might be that you miss some of the points in the meeting, or that you hesitate to speak up because all you're thinking about is, oh wait, how do I say that? And then when it's your time to speak, you hesitate and it's too late. The conversation has already gone. And when this happens, it can make you appear less engaged, even when you have a valuable idea to share. But there is good news. These mistakes happen because of how our brains process language, and they're completely normal. But with the right strategies, you can minimize them and start expressing yourself clearly and confidently. If translating is holding you back, the goal isn't to eliminate it overnight. It's to gradually replace it with thinking in English. This is definitely a process, and it starts with building mental associations in English. I like to think of it as muscle memory. When you learn a new skill, like driving a car, you don't think through every single step. Over time, your brain skips the unnecessary stages and it moves directly to action. Instead of thinking, how am I going to drive the car? You get in the car and drive. And that's the same for languages. Now you understand why translating is a problem. Let's move on to how you can fix it. Here are 3 strategies to stop translating. Learn phrases, not words. Instead of memorizing individual words, focus on learning phrases and ones that you can use immediately. Think of it as building with blocks. If you have to find each individual piece, it can take forever. But if you have pre-built sections, like, could you clarify that, please? Or, I see your point. You save time and build faster. One of my clients used to spend hours trying to remember vocabulary. She would go through her notes and just try to memorize everything. But when it came time to using the vocabulary and applying it to a meeting or a presentation, she would just freeze and forget all of the words. And when we focused on learning phrases instead of just the words, she was then able to respond more confidently in her conversations and interactions. And also, her manager noticed this immediately and said, I think you've been working really hard on your English and it's great. Another strategy is to narrate your day in English. And yes, this does mean having a conversation with yourself. And no, you're not crazy. This is something I personally do a lot in Spanish. Now, I've been learning Spanish for many years, and my journey hasn't been an easy one. I lived in Spain, I've lived in Mexico, and there's been times where I'm fully immersed in the language, and I see rapid improvement. But then I remove myself from that situation. I go to a different country, I come back to England, and I don't have that interaction. I'm not surrounded by the Spanish language. So what I found to be extremely helpful is to have conversations with myself. But how I do that is I talk about what I'm going to do today, or what I'm doing in that moment. Or I might think about and reflect on the day before or the future. For example, you might say, I'm making my coffee, and you might start quite simply by describing the coffee, thinking about how good the coffee is, or I'm preparing for a meeting, and these are the points that I'm going to share in the meeting today. And this really helps you to form sentences fluently and naturally. It's a simple but very effective way to train your brain to think directly in the language. And I remember telling a client this, and she joked with me, now I talk more of myself in English than I do with my husband. But even within a week, she noticed that she was forming phrases and sentences more effortlessly. At the beginning, it did feel quite awkward, and she did have to stop a few times. Now, what I suggest is instead of stopping and going to your phone or your device and trying to translate that particular word, try to describe that word instead of looking it up right away. The next step is to practice the words in context. When you do learn a new word or phrase or sentence, you need to be able to practice it in a specific scenario. For instance, if you learn the phrase, I'll get back to you, imagine where you might use that in a professional situation. It could be in a meeting or in an email. When you're able to connect the phrase or the sentence or even the word to the very specific scenario, your brain is able to build a connection. And when that happens, it makes it much easier to recall that vocabulary when you need it most. Now, I want you to take a moment and think about your next work task. What's one phrase or sentence that you'll be able to use? Now, let me be clear. Translating isn't bad. It can be very useful in the early stages of language learning, or it can be very helpful when you're trying to understand a complex concept. Research on translanguaging, which is when you use two or more languages together, suggests that careful translation can clarify meaning and help you to strengthen your understanding of something. I like to think of translation as using additional wheels when you learn to ride your bike. First, they keep you balanced. But if you keep on using them forever, you will never experience the freedom of riding without them. You'll always be held back. Fluency isn't about being perfect. It's about building confidence and communicating effectively. If you are ready to stop translating and start thinking in English, my Fluent English Toolkit for Professionals has everything you need to take your fluency to the next level. It's designed to help you build confidence, speak naturally, and achieve your goals faster. The link is in the description below. Let me know, what is your biggest challenge when it comes to translating? Comment below and I'd love to help you. And don't forget, next week, I'm going to share 10 phrasal verbs you need to know to succeed at work. Subscribe so you don't miss it. I'll see you next time.